Sister, you broke the ice. I'm going to ask you the first question. What makes people fall in love with Mount Aloysius College?
What makes people fall in love with Mount Aloysius College? I think the genuineness and the cheerfulness of the people, and especially the Sisters of Mercy. I'm one of the senior people here. I think Pat Gilday is more senior to me. And she's a 47, and I'm a 49er. Wow. So, well, that goes way back to the high school. And I'll tell you, I couldn't say enough about my 4 years of high school here. And people say, you know, I'm from the Alton area. And people say, didn't you miss something by going to an all-girls school than going to a high school? I said, no, I gained something. Because I came here and I met students from all different countries and everything. And it really gave me a whole outlook of life. And so I really enjoyed my 4 years here at the high school. I got into a lot of trouble. I wasn't an angel.
Well, you were a Kelly.
And I'm sure that some of you people know Sister Magdalene, who was the superior here. And if you knew Sister Magdalene, and you walked down the hall, she'd grab you by the arm, and she'd say, she did this to me one time, and I didn't know what name of God she was pointing to. And she said, look at that, look at that. I thought, what am I looking at? And then she said to me, just think, if it does that to the floor, what does it do to their stomach? And here it was, the tea room. You remember the tea room?
Yeah.
Okay. The girls would get their drink down in the tea room and come up and go to their room and spill the soda on the floor, and the acid would eat into it. So I remembered from that time on, if I saw Sister Magdalene coming towards me, I went the opposite direction.
Where was the tea room?
The tea room was down at the back door, and it was under the stairway there.
So by the St. Joseph bench.
St. Joseph's bench. Now you're.
Sister Irvin was that. She was a proprietor.
Yeah. It's you know, the last staircase going down to the basement. It was under that part there.
Okay.
It was under that part there.
Anybody else like to weigh in on that question? It's a very open-ended question. It might touch a lot of people in the audience as well. Being here for 22 months myself, I just love the place because of the people and because of the history and because of you people love this place. It's very, very obvious to me that something happened to each of you here, and it is contagious. It's a very positive infection, if you will. Anybody else like to weigh in on that issue?
I had the opportunity to give a tour to a woman who, the day after I gave her the tour, she was turning 91. And she was here the first year of the academy, and it was such an experience for me. She gave me the tour, and that was one of the biggest experiences that I had at the college, and that was when I really fell in love with the school. And I'm a student ambassador, it says in here, and that means that I give tours. So I work for the admissions office, and I obviously know the college very well because we have to give tours, but I didn't know a lot about the history of the college until she gave me the tour, and then when she started telling me about different little things like the smoking room and things like that.
We didn't have that, we had a log.
I heard about that last night.
Then she started telling me about where the library was, and I thought it was so interesting. And then I started to want to do research on my own, so I started seeing little stools, and I realized that has been here since the academy started. And I fell in love with the history of the college, and I don't know. I think it's just the history of the college that draws me in. And I just can't get over that. I think that's what it is for me.
Kate would like to make a film one of these days, and I think she wants to delve into the history a bit more closely. Kate, you broke the ice for yourself. How did the Mount change you? You're going into your senior year, a well-known student, an accomplished student. How did the Mount change, Kate?
I mentioned to Dr. Foley and some other students one time at a fireside chat, I'm a dancer, and I've been a dancer my whole life. So I'm a Mercy Scholar, and that means I'm a leader around campus. But I haven't always been this type of leader. I've been more of a quiet leader, and I'd say that one of the biggest ways that the Mountain has changed me is by bringing me out as more of an outspoken type of leader. And it gave me the opportunity to bring out this part of me. I had a bad fall and I broke a foot, and I had to change all of my goals. My senior year of high school, I had plans to go to New York City and become a dancer, and that's what I was going to do with my life. And the day before my performance, I was at a dress rehearsal and I fell and I broke my foot, and it was a terrible fall. The bone just snapped in half, and I was done. So I had no understudy and the performance was completely ruined. I had to spend the whole night in the ER teaching a dancer how to do my dance. And my future just felt ruined to me, and I had no idea what I was going to do. But then I had to come up with something for my future, and I just had to think about what I wanted to do, and I guess it just hit me that dance isn't all I had in me, and I realized that I love to write and I have a lot more in me. And I decided to apply for college, and I came to a lot of different colleges, and I fell in love with Mount Aloysius because of the small community. I'm from Altoona, and when I came here, I wanted to come here. I applied for a lot of different scholarships, and I got the Mercy Presidential Scholarship, and I came here. And the Mercy Presidential Scholarship allowed me to bring out that leader, so that's how it's really changed.
Give you some room to grow and change.
Yeah.
And get back.
Yeah.
Chris Ninjar, how have students changed since you? How long have you been here? Talk a little bit about that.
Well, I started here in January of 89, 1989.
Thanks for clarifying.
Yeah. But you asked how students change. It's an interesting question because we're all still humans, and we are the same in many ways, of course. But the biggest changes I think have taken place with in student expectations. I think student expectations for higher education are higher than they used to be. And I think part of that is because the world we live in becoming so expanded, young people now see more possibilities in the world than they saw 20 years ago. So therefore, they expect more from higher education that way. And I think also they have more varied ways of learning. And again, technology has been a big factor in that. And so from a faculty standpoint, to be attentive to those types of things, the changing perspectives and the changing ways of learning means that we have to adapt as well as faculty.
So that's been a big change for you, and probably an ongoing change, just to adapt to technologies.
Well, just everybody, when they come into a learning situation, has a certain foundation, a certain past that brings them to where they are now. And no matter what day and age that is, one of the first things that a faculty member has to do is determine what that foundation is for that group of people and for those individuals within that group, and then adapt accordingly. Because the old-fashioned days of having the old yellow lecture notes that you bring in from year to year. I mean, that's so far gone, you can't even imagine. But I had a student ask me a few years ago in one of the classes I teach every year. He said, "Doesn't this get boring to you after a while?" And it's kind of funny because it kind of caught me off guard because no, it doesn't get boring because every group of students is a group of new people with new foundations, new expectations, and I have to try to get to know them. And it's new every time from that perspective. So.
It's a refreshing perspective. It's not just the same person asking the same question over and over again. So you have to keep yourself objective, just keep yourself fresh. Pat Gilday, regional leader. What do you think people think about the mountain, and how do you think public perception of the mountain has changed since you graduated in 1927?
Well, you know, in the very beginning, when I went here, everyone considered it a girls' school.
Sure.
And that continued for years after I was here. And even today, a lot of people, when I say, well, I'm with the Mount Aloysius alumni, oh, I thought that was a girl. I said, it hasn't been since 1961, I guess it was. And I don't know why. Some of those people are close, you know, in the vicinity of Blair and Cambria County. But I don't know why they had that perception. But it has changed. And I think the change was with the publicity we get. You know, that has helped so much. And the Out to the Mirror is always on top of things and on whatever's going on here, sports or whatever might be happening. And I think zeroing in on that, people have changed over the years. Even people my age know about the mountain. But then last night I was at after I left here, I went to our Guild Day reunion. And because this is our Guild Day weekend too.
And that's a very small gathering, isn't it?
It's large.
Well, in the backyard, I think there were 100, but I don't know. But they don't think that we're, you know, the college that we are. And I said, we realize we are about a four-year college, but we also offer master's degrees in at least 5 programs. And I said that to a couple people. They don't understand all that's happening here. Then someone said, well, what's the enrollment? And I said, well, it's always close to 2,000 now, and it's really the highest it's been for years. But even in my own family, they don't realize what a gem we have here. That's what I call it. Because when I came in '47, the newest thing here, and I guess it happened while I was here, was St. Joe's. There was nothing else. Just St. Joe's, that wing. That was the newest thing here at that time. And of course, I got here on a scholarship. I never thought I'd be able to come to Mount Aloysius. And one of my friends said, well, they're going to give the exams today. Do you want to go along? And so I came, and we took the exam, and we got the scholarship. And I was, because my parents couldn't afford to send me, and then I was a day hop. We called them day hops. I don't know what they call them. But anyway, but we were fortunate. We had a lady that worked here in Cresson for the produce company, and she brought us every day and took us home usually. And there were times when she wouldn't. The Greyhound used to stop out here, right outside here. Or we would go down to the drugstore and get the Greyhound. Or we would run down the hill and get the train. The train stopped here too, and we could ride it down too. So there were always possibilities of what we might be able to do. But I just think over the years, so much has happened here, and I just marvel at the plan that they had here. I don't know about was it 10-year plan? And they deal with all it. I was telling family last night, you should come up and see that. See the campus, it's just magnificent. So I feel things are, the word is getting out, I think primarily because of the press. You know, they hear, they comment on it, and the newspaper, and then we have a lot of television programs too. But I just can't get over what has happened, you know, in those years, 56 years, I guess, since I graduated here. And it's just fantastic. And we have to thank Sister Mary Ann And now I think President Foley brought a lot of new ideas to us and how he's spreading the word and the people he sees. Because my cousin said last night, well, do you know Tom Foley? I thought, oh, yes, I know him very well. And of course, he knew him too. So there's so much here that we have to offer. And I just hope the word gets around to more places. But keep up the great public. I can't get over when I pick up the sports section. There's always something in there, what's going on with, whether it's one of the games or somebody did something special in sports.
Let me do a commercial there if I can, Jen. I know you won't. But that's been a very deliberate effort. I mean, one of the senses when I got here was that there's so many stories at this institution. Your stories. You just heard a little bit of Kate's story. There's even more to her story. John Moy's story and others, and one of my senses was we don't tell them enough. You know, we don't tell them in a public way enough. So we've been very strategic about how we get those stories out there. And they are stories about community service. Every student at this institution has to do community service. Every team, every club, every organization, it's in their charter. They don't get any money from the school unless they're doing something. Well, Jack and his very small team, and we have 2 grad assistants working with him, we make a concerted effort to get those stories out, not just to the 2 big papers here, but we go to the weeklies, you know, and we try to get the stories in there as well. And they can be everything from, you know, the basketball team painted and refurbished an outdoor court somewhere in Johnstown, to a story of one of our students who went to Guyana, you know, that we thought might have particular appeal in that area. We also try to promote other events at the college. We have a speaker series. We've had some phenomenal speakers here, and the local press has been very attentive to that. But you know, that doesn't happen by accident. It happens because Jack and his team working with who's ever doing those events. We are the ecumenical center now of this region, really because of work that's been done since Sister Helen Marie came here 6 years ago. We have 2 events here. They get written up. You know, who writes up ecumenical events? They get written up. You know, we also have, you know, Pulitzer Prize winners. We have movie directors, and we really try to pump those kinds of things out there. The sports is the easiest kind of coverage that we get because our local papers probably do more on sports, wouldn't you say, Pat, than anything else, and more original reporting, and we just let them know. And the reality is that our teams are pretty competitive. You know, we don't win every championship, but we're competitive. They're in the hunt. What they do win, I might as well say that, and we got a very good story on this. Last year, our students won the first, what they call Dean's Cup. Our student athletes essentially had the highest grade point average of all the 10 teams in our conference. And we got a story about that on the sports page. This year, our student athletes received the Community Service Award, which any group here at our school could do for the whole conference. But just a ton of great stories that we really try to push out there to try to tell that story. But it's aggressive and it's tactical, and the good news is there's just so many stories here. I mean, I say to people every day, I have at least one story that occurs that's new that I could tell people. Where's Sam? Sam Wagner led the effort to create this year. It's called the Year in Photos at Mount Aloysius College, and it went by months. And in the back, there's a legend so that you know what each of these pictures in here, I mean, some beautiful pictures of the campus. Well, every one of these pictures is a story, you know. And what we try to do is tell this, well, I opened to a page. Here's a story. Now, here's a young woman and her mother. This is a real Mount Aloysius story. It's, which, Rosie and?
Carol.
Carol's the runner. Carol's on our cross-country team. Carol finished last in every single race that she ran for 4 years at Mount Aloysius College. And in the beginning of Carol's career, her team would always be at the finish line, our Mount Aloysius kids. They would wait for Carol to cross the finish line. By the time she was in her sophomore year, everybody was at the finish line for Carol to come across. Think about the messaging of that, you know.
Yeah.
Well, and that's her mother. Her mother, Rosie, was doing her MBA here while Carol was an undergraduate. So our mother, of course, was always there. So you know, some student photographer or Sam or one of these guys took this picture. What a story that is, you know. But we could do that with every one of these. So what we've really tried to do, Pat, is just take advantage of the great stories that have always been here. And I heard some last night when we dedicated the tree. We're just talking about community service. These are graduates from 50 years ago. And the conversation around the tree and the two individuals to whom they dedicated the trees was about the service they performed in their community. So the message was the same.
I want to ask a question about the future now. Are we ready for the next generation of Mountain students? Chris, I'm going to pick on you briefly. You spoke about that briefly, but you talked about the expectations of the students, about how that's changed. What do you think the next generation is going to expect from this school?
Well, I think that's something that we kind of evolve into, knowing what the trend is, higher expectations and higher needs, really, because we have to think differently than we did before, because of the stakeholders and the community demands on higher education change. The way students learn change, and that's a gradual shift. And I think that the biggest thing is to be attentive to the direction of that shift and make those adaptations incrementally that take us to that point. One of the things you don't want to have happen is wake up someday, wait a minute, there's a new generation I don't know how to handle here. You know, but if you adapt to that gradually, then it works out.
Nursing is very strong here, very strong. I was fascinated by that, and why is that? Why do you think that nursing program is so strong here? Pat, you may have seen this over the years.
Well, I think, well, of course, the nursing schools at the hospitals, you know, went out of existence.
Sure.
And this became very popular, and the students that come from here, the graduates that come from here, are highly regarded, you know, in our area. And when I broke my hip in February, whether it was at the hospital or at Health South, I kept saying to you, "Oh, are you a graduate of Mount Aloysius?" "Yeah." I said, "Well, I'm a Mountie too." And then I tried to say, "Well, why don't you come to some of our alumni?" And then they don't say they will or they won't, but at least I planted the seed. So,
I will jump on that, Jack. There's, and I don't know if it's part of the schedule today or not. We have more simulation labs in our nursing division. We have 7 of them than any institution of higher education from State College to Pittsburgh, including the institutions in those 2 cities. I think that's one reason. So our students, which is about 1/3 of our student body, are nursing students. And these things are scary. You know, these are basically patient robots, and they are scary. They look real. They're completely outfitted with all the appropriate parts, and they react, you know, and they react differently. They program them. We have a guy named Wes. Wes's job is to program those things and basically scare the students, you know. So how it might react the first time a student attempts to do something, when the next student comes 7 minutes later, it does a different reaction, you know. And so they have to start, you know, being ready for that. So we think they're a little more ready by the time they're working on real people because of the sim labs. But I think the other thing, Pat, I had the same experience. I did one of these when I first came here. I went to the local hospital, had all the tests done, you know, do your baseline. I had 7 nurses in the course of the day of all these tests. And this was in the Altoona Hospital. And of course I asked each one, I didn't tell them who I was, but I asked them each where they had studied. And I have to tell you, the 3 that I was hoping were from Mount Aloysius were from Mount Aloysius. And if I had to say what was the little difference, I couldn't really analyze professionally, did this one know more in the little bit of time I was with them. But their manner and their attitude with me as a patient was that little bit extra. I think it has something to do with the ethos of this school that goes back to Sister Charlene and so many others with their time in here. I think some of it has to do with, you know, community service is part of the life of every student here. You know, that your life is about something larger than yourself. You know, that's a message here. And I think it carries over into nursing. But I think Pat hit the big thing. I mean, at this point in time, healthcare is probably the major employer in the area, you know. So we keep producing quality nurses and health sciences students. They'll keep getting
Just to
jobs.
add to that, about 3 weeks ago, I had a young lady that was thinking of going, she's going into college, and she was thinking of, well, she wants biology first, and then she's going into nursing. And I said to her, all right, we're going up to the 3rd floor. Now, the 3rd floor at the main building was always the high school. That's our sleeping quarters. But if anybody from the 40s and the 50s and the 60s came back here now, they would be, you know, everything has been changed. And I took her into some of these nursing labs. She couldn't get over all the things that were there. And I kept saying to her, just think of the students that we graduated in the 50s and the 60s who just went into hospitals very cold because they didn't have any of these labs and everything. And I think of that many, many times, of how some of the older students who went here didn't have this advantage and things. So it's wonderful what they've done.
Well, I'm going to use that as a segue of sorts to ask John Moist. John, what advice as a student would you give to someone thinking about going to college, about choosing what school to go to?
About choosing what school to go to, I think the number one piece of advice I would give is the school you go to is more than a place that's going to house you and teach you. It's not a factory. It is a place to open your mind. It is a place to expand your consciousness, to see that there is more to the world than yourself, and to see that there is more to yourself than you knew. And for that, you need a college, you need a university that can speak to who you are and can be not only tailored to your needs, but attuned to the kind of world you want to live in. So it's more than, do they offer, for me, English 301, Shakespeare in whatever. It's, do they offer trained, specialized courses, and do they also have the values that I have of seeing a world where nobody goes hungry, of reaching out to people around you and making sure that no one feels left out? Do they share those core values that I have? And so I would say to them, the first thing you have to do is you have to take a good look at yourself. That's the first step before you make any decision. And then look out and say, is there a place where I can be at home? Because you're not going to learn if you're not in a warm place. And this is a warm place, which I think is why a lot of people come here, and again, why people fall in love with it. Because it's a place where they're on the same wavelength you are. So that would be the advice I would give.
Hospitality plays a role there.
Yes, it does. Yeah.
Can't
You've got to
be
welcome.
What do you think about that? Do you agree? General?
Yeah.
Yeah. What advice would you give us from your experience?
I would say, first of all, that you don't have to, oh gosh, I would say you don't have to listen to other people immediately.
Great advice. Yeah. It's
That
not
would
about
be-
peers at that point. It's a personal decision. And really, it's kind of self-centered in a positive way. I mean, you need to look to your own future.
Introspection, as it were.
Both of you are senior students, and I'm going to ask this of John. So your time here has paralleled President Foley's time.
Does that mean I'm a senior too?
I'm just a sophomore, soon to be a junior, hopefully. What's been your experience? I mean, you've seen a whole transition take place. What does that look like from the student's point of view?
From a student's point of view, it's very exciting to be at the college, at the high point, the finale of the 10-year plan. You know, seeing the Athletic Convocation and Wellness Center being built every day. When I drive in to work, when I drive into school, it's exciting because it's a physical manifestation of the expansion of the idea of Aloysius. You know, it's more than floor space, and which I mean, plenty of floor space. It's amazing, but at the same time, it's also the continuation, the expansion of an idea, and that's what's so exciting about it. When I'm on tours, one of the things I like to say is, if it isn't exciting you yet, look at a picture from 15 years ago. Look at a top-down view from 15 years ago. Get a campus map. And there are, not only are there more buildings, there's more open space, there's more beautification, if you'll accept the term. There's just more wonderful places at this college. It's gone from 1 building to 2 to 3 to 4 to Cosgrave being redoubled and expanded to the Athletic Convocation and Wellness Center, and it's a feeling of excitement. I think in the now going on my 4th year here, it's the only word for it. It's exciting. I like to think that President Foley and I have come up together in this. I'm sure looking back at the end of the 4 years, he'll say John Moist was a great influence on me.
But I have to tell you, John Moist is much more talented than me. You should see him. We have something called, you've seen the TV show America's Got Talent. Well, we have here, we've done it 3 years in a row now, we call it Max Got Talent. Honestly, John Moist is so good, we have to have him be the MC. This guy can sing Frank Sinatra, The Supremes, Broadway show tunes, plays musical instruments, but he MCs the event. Honestly, because he would win every year. He's multi-talented. And these two are the co-managing editors of our newspaper, which has also made exponential growth in the times, at least that I've been here, in the work that they've done. So they're thoughtful writers. They're careful editors with their classmates, and it's been interesting to watch, actually, the two of them. Kate, I don't know if you remember, you were the first person to interview me when I came here. Do you remember that? Kate was a freshman, and she interviewed me for the school newspaper. So I really had the chance to watch both of them, and it's really been terrific. But I mean talent. There is a ton of talent in those two. We should say a word about, John referred to the master plan. My predecessor, who many of you know, was Sister Mary Ann Dillon. Sister Mary Ann and Sister Ginny Birchie, who was the senior VP, it was their idea to put together a campus master plan. This is going back 13, 15 years now. And they brought in a firm to look at the whole campus. I'm not going to show you the pictures now, but a lot of you have images of the old campus. And essentially, I'm reducing it a little bit, but as John referred to, it was essentially about 10 steps. But those steps involved everything from, and this was a difficult decision to knock down the original Macaulay, which was the residence for the sisters. But when they looked at the whole plan, it would have cost more to fix it up. And it opened up the vista, you know, in front of Old Main. Even the little thing of when you came onto the campus, how beautiful that entrance is, that was all part of the master plan. There's 2 new dormitories here, which are as nice as any dormitories at any college. I have 3 sons who went to private colleges, and trust me, these dorms are as nice or better than anything they were ever in. We have a new classroom building, which is essentially a high-tech science building. As John mentioned, Cosgrave is 40% bigger. This building we're in pushed it out and pushed it up a little bit. But the bottom line was that in Sister Mary Ann's 13 years, the floor space of the college increased by 41%. That's interior space. When she left the college, 61% of our classrooms were smart classrooms. We're now at 80%, which is where we don't need to be higher than that. But that's phenomenal progress. I inherited the last few steps of that campus master plan. I think the first day that I was on campus, Alumni Hall, 100-year-old building, hadn't really had anything done to it, you know, since it was built, and we refurbished it. When I say refurbished, the only new thing we put in there was high-tech equipment to facilitate theater and concerts, and we put seats in there that push in and push out. Otherwise, we just refurbished the original balustrades across the ceiling. That's real plaster on those walls. Those are, I'm not sure they're the original sconces, but they're from a long time ago. That's original stained glass. We took the stained glass out and cleaned it because it was actually very dark by then. And then the last part of the campus master plan was the Athletic Convocation and Wellness Center, which we had been postponed for quite a while for financial reasons. We got a very large grant from the Commonwealth. Lots of other colleges have gotten those grants in the past. We just, I don't think, applied for many of them, and we got one. And that alone will increase the floor space another 30% of the college. And we've already started this summer on the next campus master plan. You know, so we've finished this one, which was Sister Marianne and Sister Ginny's concept. Now we're getting ready to start on the next one, and we'll see where that takes us. But it was all planned, and some tough decisions along the way. But it's really pretty remarkable. And when people come on, they can't get over it. Even think about that beautiful brick walkway. When you leave Old Main and you see the library in front of you, that was part of the master plan. That was beautiful. It so united the campus, and the construction, with really only the exception of the current gym, has all been consistent with that plan in an architectural way. You know, things really hold together. And when you go on other campuses, even around here, they don't have that sense of unity. And I think that's a little bit of John's point about closeness. You know, it's 193 acres, so it's big enough, but it's small enough, it's consistent enough, you can feel safe and you can grow, you know, in an environment like that.
We're going to talk a bit about service. I went to a Jesuit college, don't hold it against me. But the service focused at this school is remarkable in my experience. The last academic year was 12,750 hours of service, contributed by mostly students and some faculty and staff. And I wanted to hear the student perspective on that. What is that service piece meant to your time here at the Mount John? Or Kate?
I'll pop in after she does. If you want to say. I'll speak from, I was fortunate enough to be able to attend the December 2012 trip to New Orleans with campus ministry. And I cannot emphasize enough how ingrained service is in the college. President Foley mentioned it's in club charters. When we were going about forming a new club, so I founded the Political Awareness Coalition on campus this past semester, and the first thing we talked about was how can we turn this and use it for service? How can we do something for people outside the club? You know, it's not just a meeting place, it's something to push boundaries, to make connections. And in my time in New Orleans, and Kate was on that trip too, it was an astounding time. I saw things I never thought I would see. We flew in on a Saturday mid-afternoon, and we got off the plane and we head to the place where we're staying. We stayed at Camp Restore. It's a work community, so you stay there and then you go out into work projects during the day. And we went, our first stop was of course Walmart, because you have to get supplies. So here we are at a Walmart in New Orleans, and I'm spending most of my time marveling at the fact that, because I'm a Pennsylvania kid, well, I'm spending my time marveling at the fact that you can buy liquor in a Walmart in the South, you know? And we go up to the checkout, and I think the cashier says, "You don't sound like you're from around here." And was it you that was in line with me, or was it? Oh, you were with a different group that night. Yes, my fellow trip member said, "No, we're from Pennsylvania." She said, "Well, why are you down here?" Because I'm not going to attempt to imitate a New Orleans accent. And she said, "We're helping to build houses and restore homes." And the woman stopped what she was doing, and she looked at us and she said, "Thank you." And just out of nowhere. I don't know, you know, how many honest connections do you make with your cashier at Walmart, you know? And in that moment, that woman was looking at us and thanking us for coming down there and helping to restore people to their homes. And we realized there are moments where you step outside yourself and you realize, I'm doing something, I'm touching something way bigger than me. And those are the best moments. And I realized that for 1 week, I was going to get this crazy opportunity to make a difference. And I think students are really in tune with that you go on a service trip, or with Political Club, we're doing a Get Out the Vote campaign. We're registering people to vote. And it all starts with seeing a need. And I think students here are attuned to see needs. And I don't mean that, I'm not falsifying that in any way. I genuinely feel that students here know that things need to be done. The students who went down to the New Orleans trip knew the devastation of Hurricane Katrina. We saw pictures. You know, we didn't really see it until we were down there. But you know, with Political Club, you know, Pennsylvania's 10 million eligible voters, 2 million of them aren't registered. What are we going to do about that? We're going to do something. And I can say I'm very proud to be a member of a college community that does things and doesn't just talk about things.
Thanks, John. Chris?
Can I say one thing about the service side, Jack? Those hours that Jack mentioned were 366 different projects. So John's experience, which has been replicated every year, my son was an MBA student here, and he went to New Orleans as well. But most of those projects are right here. You know, most of those 366 projects are within 50 miles of our campus, I'd say. And we did them with 217 different community partners. And some of them are in areas where we're directly assisting our own students and their communities. 94% of our students need financial aid to go to this college. 40% of our students get the 2 highest Pell Grants, which is the federal supplement. And if you get the 2 highest, it means that your family income is less than $38,000. Now that's very reflective of the area in which we live. But think about that for a second. You know, 40% of our students come from families with a total income of under $38,000. That's why we preach scholarships. We do more individual scholarships that people don't know. But I think that influences some of our community service work, that our own kids know, you know, we have needs in our own communities and take us there and work at it. Do you think that's true, John?
I really do.
Yeah. Sorry, Jack, I know.
Well, it's okay.
Stealing his thunder.
Chris, you reacted with siphon. I know that the service piece also extends to faculty as well. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Well, you know, so much of the service component is present in a lot of colleges, but I think one of the things that's unique about Mount Aloysius is the motivating factors for that service. And that goes all the way back to Catherine McCauley. Sure. You know, Catherine McCauley dedicated her life to empowering other people to succeed in life. And that's the motivating, animating element that drives service here, is to empower other people. And that's, you know, you mentioned SITE, now Enactus. You know, that's the mission of that organization, is to empower other people. So I think the unique factor that addresses the cultural aspect that John referred to earlier, that fit for people, is the animating element of that service and the intangibles that surround that.
John brought up the core values. I thank you for doing that. It's a great segue.
I'm always happy to provide.
Hospitality, service, justice, compassion, and those are alive and well here, and very, very real here. And that's one of the aspects that fascinates me about the Mount, is that's been nurtured and cared for very, very consciously. And that is very, very obvious to me as a relative newbie. And Sister, I want to ask you, how has that been done? And that has been a real focus. It's been thought out, and it stamps us and seems to touch everybody in this room. Kudos to the Sisters of Mercy. But how has that been done, and how do you see that continuing into the future? It's a big question. We've talked about service. We just completed a year in hospitality, which brought a myriad of great speakers to the school, and that focus just continues on. And my hats off to the Sisters of Mercy, and excuses to the Jesuit schools, but I think I'm a convert, because I really see that as alive and well here.
Well, can I call on Sister Helen? I think Sister Helen could really give some input into that. Very good.
And especially,
Way to go, Sister
should call on
Charlene.
Sister Helen because it's Sister Helen's birthday.
Oh!
It's Sister Helen's birthday.
Well, I mean, you could answer it very well, Charlene. I think maybe there are three ways that we've tried to do it as a congregation. Now, the Sisters of Mercy, you know, are much younger than the Jesuits in terms of our history. But we have had, from the beginning, a sense of the works of mercy, and those are very broad. And so there isn't a limit to the sense of where our energy goes. But I think probably the three things that have been most important are, of course, the women themselves. And those are the people you remember. I mean, the number that have been at this institution over the years and the quality of their person and their reflection in their own personalities, which are quite different, of the values that we talk about a lot within the congregation, out of the story and out of the history: mercy, justice, hospitality, and service. And so I have to say that's how we've done it. Now, in the years more recently, when we've had fewer women, we've had deliberate decisions about how to keep the story going. From the beginning, we recognized we've never done it alone. At this institution and at every institution, we have always had lay colleagues. We have never been a congregation who has singularly staffed any of our institutions. And those persons from the beginning bought into what we were trying to do. And that is our hope and our promise for the future. We have on this campus men, and like Chris, we have women who have given 20, 30, I think we retired a man who had given close to 40 years of service last year. They get the story and they continue the effort, and they represent in their lives the values, and that keeps the story alive. And then the third is you keep telling it. I think Dr. Foley mentioned earlier. You keep telling the story. You keep telling it to new generations. They begin to tell it themselves. They become part of the story. It's the story that carries the values. Values don't exist in an abstract. If you don't have a story that carries the values, you forget the values very quickly. So I think keeping the story alive, and that's why you do things like, you know, have certain symbols around the campus. You have certain, we celebrate Mercy Week. I mean, it's all about getting the story into the mouths and the minds and the hearts of the people that are currently here. It'll carry itself because it's a wonderful story. I mean, so I would say, you know, kind of off the top of my head, that's but it is deliberate, yes.
Could I just do an addition to that? We're 50 years ago, and we were Mercy visitors.
Yeah.
We were
Yes.
living that story out then because of the Sisters of Mercy. We were a group of women that went to the sanitarium, and we visited those people, and that was the story that was instilled in us, you know, 50 years ago. So that's just an example of how that was so prominent then, and through those stories it continues.
Well, and Chris and I just had this conversation yesterday, was it, or the day before? And in his question, as somebody that, like, it's, yes, if the young people who are here understand what drives the school, like John was suggesting, you got it, that we're not just educators in the sense of skills and knowledge, but we're also educators about the human person and the human world that we wish. And young people get it best by doing it.
and then
And then
carry it out
that's
through
right,
your own
you
life.
get committed, and look at all that all of you have done.
It's
No.
a beautiful success story, and it really carries on. And you can feel it here, and it's truly been you can feel it as soon as you walk in that door. You're not ever, people aren't judged, they're welcomed. People are, and they're welcomed for themselves as they are, which is wonderful. They're not prejudged at all. They're welcomed and they're nurtured and they're taught. Wonderful success. I want to segue a big question over to President Foley. President Foley, 2020, what do you think we're going to look like in the year 2020? And who do you think will be served? It's a question that I think it's a large question, and it focuses us clearly on the future.
Jack gave me a little preview. He was going to ask me that question, so I had a chance to think about it. I thought about things that are not going to change, and then things that might change or that are part of the evolutionary process. I mean, things that won't change, what we were just talking about, the sense of service at this institution. When I was inaugurated as the president, I said that I called it the Mount Aloysius Compact, that there are three things that we are committed to doing here. One is to produce job-ready students. Most of our kids really need to go, our students, to work the day they graduate. They don't have the opportunity to just sit at home at mom and dad's. So we have to make sure they're ready for that. And that's a little bit different twist on education than some institutions. Secondly, that we produce community-ready graduates, that they understand when they leave here what it means to live in a community, that you participate in some way. And we try to make that part of their experience here so it becomes part of their lifelong experience. So job-ready, community-ready, and the last piece that I added was technology-ready, because our sense was if we don't make sure that they are technology fluent, they're not going to be able to stay employed and be active in the community, sort of things. And I think that part of what we do isn't going to change. The second thing that won't change is this institution's always been about the needs of this community and these students. Think about the history of this college when those 7 Sisters of Mercy from Dublin came over on a boat, took a train as far as Chambersburg, Pennsylvania, and got on, I guess, a stagecoach. And 7 of them decided to come across the mountains. The other 7 went direct to Pittsburgh because they knew and heard about the story of Prince Gallitzin, the first ordained priest, Eastern European royalty in the United States. He had died the year before, but they wanted to sort of go to that area. When they came here, they realized nobody was educating young girls. And even though they were on their way to Pittsburgh, because Pittsburgh had an Irish-born KG bishop who knew Catherine Macaulay and how good she was, and he got her to send him 14 of her young ladies, they said, we'll be back, and we'll start a school. And that's how the academy started. And they came back, and they built that first school in Loretto, which burned down about 40 years later. And as I always say, one thing you know about the Mercies, they don't whine, they just rebuild, and they built on this site. But, it was a reflection of what was the need at the time. And the need was nobody was educating young girls. Old Maine, there was a lot of bartering that went on. If you do this work for us, we'll educate your daughters. And this school is still that way. We are, 1/3 of our students are nursing students. 1/3 of our students are in the health sciences. That's a big need in this area. It's also an area, again, where we can get our students into jobs. There's a high need for what our students are studying in those areas. And that's a reflection of the economic needs of this area. So that won't change in the sense that we will continue to be reflective of the needs of the community within which we live and of the students who choose to come here. We just had a prison closed down which employed 500 plus people, a half a mile up the road. In the 70s and 80s, when steel plants and coal mines were closing down, this college announced that anyone who was displaced from work because of those closures would have a free semester at this institution. We made the same offer when the prison closed. You can come here for a free semester if you're not able to find another job out of that. That's reflecting the needs of this community. And that piece is not going to change. That's Jack's buzzer. And I think the last thing that won't change is the kind of mix of education and students that we have here. We are about 35, 65%. 35% of our students are in 2-year curriculums. Many of them choose to go on to the 4-year curriculum. But they're in a curriculum where they're employable. You know, they're radiology, they're surg techs, they're medical assistants, etc. We're going to continue that ratio because we have a ton of students that's what's necessary and important for them. That's the next step. Secondly, we have a ratio that's again about 35, 65 of mature students versus traditionally aged students. And we're more and more finding more traditionally aged right out of high school students want to come to Mount Aloysius, but we're working hard to keep that ratio. There's an interesting balance, and there's interesting things that happen in classrooms. My first year here, the person who did the welcoming address, the salutatory, was 80 years old. Went to college, he went to Carnegie Tech, you know, out of high school, you know, which is now Carnegie Mellon, for about 2 years. Korean War, family, 3 sons, no more college. And came back here when he was 78 years old. Had put their 3 sons through college. He was the first in his family of 7 to graduate. Charlie, yeah, Charlie was here yesterday. He'll probably be back again today. His 88-year-old sister took the bus up from Baltimore to see him graduate because he was the first of 7. He did a terrific job in his welcoming address. But the reporter did a story that ran nationally. We were in 65 markets around the country. And one of the questions she asked him was, she didn't know what carbon paper was, you know. And she said to him, you know, well, how do you do your papers, you know? And he said, well, when I first started school, I would have used carbon paper to make copies or whatever. And he said, but I do it on the computer like everybody else. And this young reporter said, well, you know, what do you do if something goes wrong on the computer? Well, what are you going to do, you know? And he goes, I just asked one of my classmates, you know? And people knew Charlie, you know, and I mean, he was an exception in many ways. But I personally, I took a class myself the first year I was here. I felt like I need to be on that side of the podium. And I watched the interactions in a very genuine way between 3 nursing students who sat next to me in the class. We were around a table, and they were this way, and I was right here. And one was a traditional age student. One was a mature student who had 2 children, had lost her husband to a debilitating brain disease, was in her mid-30s. And the other one was a young student that this was her second try. She was in her early 20s and things hadn't worked out. The interaction between those 3 was terrific. The traditional age student, everything worked out. She was a senior nursing on her way to her job. The mom, the young mom, was great. It was everything that she could do to get out of the house in the morning with her hair on the top of her head, you know. And she was so funny about that. And then, of course, our 21-year-old woman, everything was always perfect, you know. And the interplay between them, you know, I think that's part of the magic here, that there's always things you can learn from other people. So those things aren't going to change. The 2 things that obviously will change a little bit in the coming years, Jack. One is the physical plan's going to continue to evolve. You know, we are going to look at another 10-year, 15-year plan beginning this summer. It'll take us a couple years to develop it, but what's next for us? We own the 20+ acres right across the street from the college. My dream for that would be if we could get a medical care facility of some kind to build on that space. That would be great for us, for our students. It would be great for them because they'd have great students like ours, you know, working there regularly, but it would facilitate even more clinicals, you know. We'll look for things like that, but we'll, you know, go through that process and we'll continue to evolve the physical plan. We have room to grow, but we don't want to overgrow. Pat said 2,000 students. We have about over 1,600 students on this campus on a daily basis when we're in full swing. We think, and this will be part of this master plan, 2,000, 2,200 on campus on a daily basis, that we can handle that number. And the question is, what else do we need to do to get to that number, both in terms of our admissions efforts and in terms of our physical infrastructure? The other thing that's going to continue to change and evolve is the use of technology on the campus how we build around technology in the classroom. If you go to our library now, we still have a ton of books in there. But the library has evolved. The last thing that Sister Marianne did was to create a learning commons in the library. Kids learn differently now, I think, than, at least in my day. They're much more collaborative. And they'll do things together, or they might be working alone, but they'll have 3 people next to them working on their gizmos at the same time. And you have to facilitate that in the learning environment. And the Learning Commons does that, you know. And you'll see, if you go into the library on the right side, that's the Learning Commons. There's all different ways that students can sit down and do their work. And there's no books over there, you know. There's technology, you know. And as we continue to evolve in this age where the digitalization of America, we're going to have to evolve in that way, both in our classrooms and in our library. Michelle and I, my wife Michelle, we had the opportunity to meet with the librarian, the country's Librarian of Congress. This is an 87-year-old man who is a Mount Aloysius story, and I just confirmed yesterday he's going to come here and deliver a lecture in the spring. His name is Dr. James Billington. Went to a public high school in Pennsylvania, first in his family to go to college, graduated first in his class at Princeton. He was a Rhodes Scholar. He's done all these phenomenal things, written all these books. Here he is, 87 years old, and as we're leaving the room, after about an hour in his office with him, Michelle, as is often the case, asked the best question. She says to him, "What are you reading right now? You know, you're the Librarian of Congress. You know, what are you reading? What's on your nightstand right now?" You know what the first book he told us? He's reading a book on the digitalization of America and what the impact is on the human brain. You know, the guy is way out front on digitalization of libraries and, you know, all those kind of things. And I think in terms of the physical difference, if you come back here 10 years from now, as technology fluent as we think we are, it'll be even more, you know, and you'll probably see it most in the library. The last example that I'll give to you of that is, I think most people in this room can identify with this. You're thinking back doing a term paper, and how did you do your research? You know, you got the Reader's Guide to Periodical Literature, it was that greenback thing, get your articles, go get your articles, read them, write your notes, you know. These kids don't even know what that is. You know? They have 100 search engines, and they know all of them. And they'll go into one of those search engines, the type of thing. And the issue for them isn't where to find the information, it's how to evaluate that information and choose the most reliable, you know, competent source. And we have to continue to grow to help them make those kind of decisions. And that's not about getting more books, it's about getting more fluent in a digital age. So I think those are the 2 areas where we will see change. Some change in the physical plant, some change in technology related to education. Thanks for telling me ahead of time so I can think about the question.
I want to thank everybody on this panel, President Foley, Chris, Sister, John, Kate, Pat, and it was a lot of fun for me. And what I thought, I would like to throw this open. If you have any questions, we can stay here for a couple of minutes, if that's okay with everybody. If you have any questions.
I do have a question. I was wondering about, I see a lot of things going on in the world and in the United States with regard to, and I am not a politically correct person, I am not, and I will announce that to the world. I want to know about God and His place in this university. That's my question, because God doesn't seem to exist anywhere in the world, to me. And I just wonder, in Catholic schools, because when we came here, everything was so, to me, wonderful, and it was comfortable because we were with all of us, and something that we all were cohesive with. We had to be, we were comfortable because everybody was in the same train of thought and the same morality. And you understand what I'm saying? So what is the college's future on that, on Catholicism or on religion? What's the deal? Where's God in all of this?
As
yes,
a layperson,
please.
I came here from a Catholic hospital in Scranton. And there's a parallel for me there. And I'm glad you asked the question because it means a lot to me personally. The Eucharist on this campus. It's in our chapel. It's here 24 hours a day, all the time. For me, that is personal meaning. And going out from that, core values are a direct link, in my mind, a worshipful link to a God through a tradition that has relevance to the world. And that's how it works for me. It's a personal answer to a wider question, but that's how it works for me. It's a great question.
Let me say a word, Jim. Our campus, we're a Catholic college, descended from the traditions of the Sisters of Mercy. Less than 50% of our students are identified as Catholic. So we're a diverse campus, and we try to respect that. We invest in a financial and a organizational way in promoting that sense of mission. So Sister Helen Marie's title is Vice President for Mission Integration. When I was interviewed for this job, I don't know if Sister Helen liked when I said this. She was on the search panel, but they said, do you have any questions? I said, yeah, I want to know how I can get a job when my title is Mission Integration. But that's what that is about. It's not just God, but the larger sense of community and our place in it. And not very many institutions invest their resources in that direct way. There's a ton of ways that Sister Helen leads us in being sure that it is a force on this campus. Everything from when Mass is offered here to Mercy Week, and the bishop comes and gives a lecture, and we tell him what we want him to talk about, and he does. He's been terrific for us. Our baccalaureate is an especially moving ceremony. But everything that we do in the service realm is connected to that larger notion of God, that it's a lot bigger than us, individually. Let me stop there and ask Sister Helen anything that she would like to say in response to your very good question.
Well, no, I think you've covered, the highlights are what you could do in a short while, but I think it may be to say that we articulate and are very clear of that Catholicism is the root. And we have an all-college liturgy, for instance, even though less than 50% of our students are Catholic, because we say this is the main worship of our tradition, and we want you to understand it because it's happening on campus every Sunday evening. It's happening on campus Tuesdays and Thursdays. We do not have a resident chaplain right now. We have a fine religious studies program in which programs are offered specifically on Catholicism, but also, of course, on world religions and on the history of religion in the United States, things of this sort, because of the diversity. We do have a faith-based campus. About 90% of our students do check a religious tradition, and most of those are Christian. We've had a Muslim student, we've had a couple of Jewish students, but mostly the ones that check are, of the Christian. So we do try to have present, like, what do they call the praise and worship services for our students who are in another tradition. And we encourage conversations about religion. So I think the idea of God is both comfortable in conversation. Now, Katie and John would have to answer that question better than I, but I don't think our students shy from that. I think most of our students acknowledge God, and most of them acknowledge a tradition of faith. Now, they are young people, so part of their struggle and growth is pushing against whatever that faith tradition is that they've heard, and that's fine. We encourage that, but we also give them some resources. Our campus ministry is very active, very visible, and it's clearly a place of gathering for persons who are not only Catholic but of other traditions. So we don't try to hide it, and we don't try to soften the rigor, I want to say, of Catholicism, but we also are careful that it isn't presented in a rigid manner, which is a disservice to the very tradition that we want to.
Does the Mount have an actual mission statement?
We do, yes.
You do?
Yes,
Okay.
we do. And it has Catholic, can I say it? No, I cannot. But I can say phrases of it. It's about quality education, it's about community response, it's about the Catholic, Judeo-Christian tradition, Judeo-Catholic tradition, and the Sisters of Mercy, but I don't know how to put it all together. But
Can
we do.
I just add one
Yes.
thing?
Good.
You know, I came from North Carolina in 1961. That was the year I won my money. But I
Where is that money now?
That's right.
I was what they called a PK, a preacher's kid.
There you go.
My father was a minister, but he died when I was 16. Now, my mother put me on a Greyhound bus, and I went down to that drugstore, wherever it was, and Manning, the
Manning.
Oh, man.
picked me up and brought me back
God
here.
bless you.
But in reference to what she's saying, you know, I think about then and now, and it is so different. The reason I survived here those 2 years was the nurturing of the Sisters of Mercy. 'Cause that's all I saw. That's all I knew. I was a non-Catholic. But they kept me in the fold. I mean, they surrounded me. And so years later, I come back and I'm looking around and I only see Sister BJ and a few other sisters, you know, I'm saying, okay, are they still in this? You know, because they kept us together. Even the wayward girls, you know. Little breaks and stuff. I mean, you know, but I mean, that was what helped me survive. I don't think I would have made it without that.
Well,
Yeah.
it's
And I
fun.
just wondered if it's still.
Yeah, I love the way you express that, Sandra. I say often, it's not directly on point to your question, but I've never been anyplace. Now, I'm not a traditional president, though Michelle says now I can say that I am because I've been here for 3 years. I didn't spend my career in higher education. But I've been in a lot of places where mission was central. I've never been in a place where the connection between the faculty and the staff and the students is so immediate, is so close, you know. I mean, Chris is one example here today. These guys could tell you there's a ton of these faculty members and there's a ton of staff here who really know these students, you know, in a very personal way and engage and assist them. You know, I think that's a very spiritual dimension to this place. That's very like what you were saying, Sandra. We only have 2 Sisters of Mercy on staff here. Now I see 4 Sisters of Mercy a lot, you know, others who come and do all kinds of really constructive things on this campus. We only have 2. But somehow it's infused itself. You can't say it's 100%, but there's a ton of people here who are really genuinely closely connected to these students. I think one of my very first experiences of that was going to a cross-country meet on campus. We only had 1 meet on campus my first year, so I wanted to get out there and see the kids. And if you know if you've ever been parents of a runner, we have a runner, nobody goes to those meets except the parents, you know. And you go and it's 8 o'clock in the morning on a Saturday and you're standing there in the cold. And I'm talking to the various little collections of people who I'm assuming these are all family. The last group I'm talking with, the gun goes off, the race starts, and I finally said, you know, so which is your child? Well, I was with 4 people. 3 of them, 2 of them were faculty members, and 1 was a staff member, and one of the faculty members is standing next to me, sitting next to me. He didn't have a child running in the race. He had a student running in the race, you know. But I had a ton of those experiences since then, where I'm at events, and our faculty and staff are very engaged. And I think in that sense of developing, Sandra, that still goes on. Are we successful in every case? No. Do we try in every case? Yes. You know, that kind of magic is still here. Last thing I just have to tell, because your story started off with a question about God. When the bishop was here this year, we asked him to speak on the topic, the theology of hospitality, because our theme for the year was hospitality, creating home in a changing world. He did a fabulous speech, which we've turned into a monograph, an hour-long lecture on hospitality in a gospel sense, the parables and everything else. We had a lunch after. We had about 40 people, Sister Helen, and you know, we had a mix of faculty and staff. We had a couple of board members there. We put the bishop at a table with 10 students, just him and 10 students. He's my age. He looks 15 years younger. It's not fair. But he sat with them, and he had a great time with them. And of course, the first question was one of Mac's daughters, one of our security guy's daughters, the student here. First question she says to him out of the box is, so what's the worst thing you ever did? You know? But he just really, you know, got into it, you know, and it was great with him. But
He wasn't ever a kid in his life, did he?
yeah, well, you know what? He's actually, I think, part of the reason we've so far, Sister Helen Marie, we've had a very good relationship with him. He's been very responsive and helpful here. He hasn't tried to impose things on us. But I think one of the reasons is he has 6 brothers and sisters, and they don't think he's a prince. You know, I picked that up. You know, he's their brother, you know, and his mother is just as happy. I said to him, I guess your mom comes a lot to stay at the residence, beautiful residence. He says, now, he says, I have a hard time getting here. I don't have any children. You know, she goes with the grandchildren. But he's, you know, been positive in that way.
If you don't mind, I'd like to say one thing. It's very interesting to be at the institution at a time when there are fewer Sisters of Mercy on campus, and they're outstanding in what they do. They really are. But I can say, I would not still be in college if it weren't for the support of the faculty here. There are students that from the first time they step into high school, everybody believes in. You know this person's going to get great grades, they're going to be a fantastic student. And there are students that nobody believes in. And in high school, I was one of those students. I was told, you're probably not going to make it to college. And just that mentality stays with you. Being told something it molds you. It really does. And so the day I got confirmed as a Mercy Presidential Scholar was really one of the first times that any body said, we'll take a chance on you. You have potential. You can do something. And that was the most heartening thing that's ever happened to me. And it changed my life. Because over the next 2 years, I just discovered I can write. You know, I can do all these things. I can speak in public. I can, and it's this explosion of being. And I would not have made it through my freshman year. It was a very tough time, just shedding that mentality of I can't do this. This is ridiculous. Why am I here? I'm an honors student, and I'm telling you, every single time I got an email from the coordinator of the honors program at the time, I was convinced it was them. They found me out. They're kidding. They found this kid isn't smart. But have you checked this guy? Why do they like this guy? And it never came. And wonderful people helped me through. Dr. Penny O'Connor, she's a chemistry professor here. She's outstanding. She has a heart that astounds with how much she cares about her students. And the English professors, when I spent 3 semesters as a science major, and that was not for me. I realized I wanted to switch to English, and again, they took a chance. They've never read a single thing I've written, that kind of thing, and they took a chance. And now I'm editor at large, you could say, for the Bell Tower. I write academic papers. I wrote a paper last semester on the King David Hotel bombing in Jerusalem and its effects on British occupation of Palestine in the 1950s.
Jeez.
I have no idea how that happened. I have no idea how that came together. It's all a blur. A lot of Red Bull. But I think it's because of these people. It's because of the Sisters of Mercy. And it's because of the faculty here that I stayed here. There's one thing that I know to be true in this institution. It's that doors are open. I have seen professors, they're not even in office hours and their doors are open. Because they're there, and why not? And that's the mentality here. And that's how I know that whether the numbers of Sisters of Mercy here may fluctuate, as it will, time moves on, but the people will still continue to serve as instruments of those values. And that, to me, is the story. Here.
May I comment? I wanted to address something about John. I was a member of Toastmaster for a few years.
You'll have to
Toastmasters is a group of people that gather and learn how to speak without saying 10,000 times and, or, e, I, o, u. It is absolutely a phenomenal group of people, and they teach you how to speak eloquently. And when you first spoke this morning, I said, wow, I wonder if you learned that. You're an excellent speaker. I just want to compliment you on that. Excellent speaker. Only a few ums. But not in the first go-around, in this tiny little one, I think there were about 2 or 3. And it's funny because in Toastmasters, we actually count those.
Yeah.
And you would be, if that evening, yes, you would be the counter that evening, you know. Oh, and you know is another one you shouldn't say. But I wanted to address myself now, when I came to the Mount. I went to co-ed Catholic schools from kindergarten to my senior year in high school, co-ed. And now I'm going to this all-girls Catholic school, and I'm thinking to, and they were all Catholic. There was I went to one school, my whole life, St. Luke's High School, grammar school and high school. Right. So we all grew up together, these kids. Now I'm going to this all-girls Catholic college, and I'm thinking to myself, oh my God, what am I going to do in an all-girls Catholic college? This isn't going to work. And I came here. I have to tell you that I became a better student. No competition with the gentlemen in the class, or boys, or whatever your girl, you know what I'm saying? The nuns, Sister Irvin and all of those, Sister Silverius, and all those nuns that at that time, I was so homesick that when I called my mom, I was crying to the point where the operator had to just wait and wait and wait for me to get the telephone number out. My mother on the other end, she's waiting for me to speak for 15 minutes. I was so homesick, I wanted to go home. The nuns were like your mom. They like took the place of your mom here. I became a much better student in an all-girls Catholic college, here at the Mount than ever. And then when I left the Mount, I graduated from Fairleigh Dickinson. And I continued to be a good student, even though that was a non-Catholic co-ed. And I continued. So it just made me such a better student. And the nuns, of course, I can't say another one about them. I loved it here. I just absolutely loved those nuns. And I'm glad to be back. I'm thanking Mike. Okay, you're coming in. Like, no, I'm not. Yes, you're coming back 50 years later. Here I am. I'm happy to be here. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. It's probably, if there are no further questions, I think the people that have a schedule to keep are about ready to hook me. So I want to thank you all for being here. It's been a real pleasure for me, and I hope for you. And again, I want to thank everybody on this panel. And with that, we'll say adieu.
Thank you.